Hi, good morning. So we're looking at managing people in organizations again today, but we're going to be looking at learning outcome 4. Now, over the past few sessions, we've looked at learning outcome 1, where it is to understand key elements of the recruitment and selection process. So we just looked at how you should interview, how you should prepare a job description, things like discrimination and what the legislations are in accordance to this. Then we looked at learning outcome 2, know how organizations carry out performance management. So we just talked about the 7-step processes for this, how performance management is done, how often this should be done, and what the benefits are for employees and the organization. And then we looked at learning outcome 3, which was know how organizations develop people. And then we looked at things like training, coaching, mentoring, the learning cycles, quite in depth to psychometric tests and what sort of what is the appropriate support that can be offered to employees. Now today we're going to be looking at learning outcome 4, which is know how to ensure employee training is effective. So 4.1, which is explain the key elements of a learning organization. Then 4.2, describe the elements of the training cycle. 4.3, explain the characteristics of effective training courses. Then we have 2 merit criteria here. So 4M1, explain the purpose of training needs analysis and how to carry one out. 4M2, so choose 3 different training methods and describe the advantages and disadvantages of their use. And then the distinction criteria. 4D1, produce the learning objectives for a work-related training course. Now I'll make a start on our PowerPoint. Now to reiterate, we're looking at learning outcome 4, know how to ensure employee training is effective. So we're going straight into 4.1 here. So explain the key elements of a learning organization. Now, learning organization is a term that refers to an organization that actually monitors its environment for changes, and it learns from this and adapts to these changes. Now, this term was actually coined by Harvard's Chris Argyris, but it was Peter Senge, who is a highly acclaimed business strategist, and he's got a PhD in management, who actually popularized this term in a book that he wrote called The Fifth Discipline. Now, Senge defines the learning organization as a dynamical pro-system. So this is a system where there's continuous adaptation and improvement ongoing within this. So learning organizations actually build on feedback. So you're looping how it actually works because it's continuous adaptation and it's continuously improving. It looks at feedback and it's designed to maximize the effectiveness of the learning process. So it's continuously improving within here. Now, we've got an image here which shows the 5 elements of a learning organization. So in the center of it all is a system thinking. And then we've got like a cycle going on around it. We've got personal mastery, we've got shared vision, mental models, and team learning. So personal mastery would be something that maybe the person or the employee would like to master on their own to gain a particular qualification, to gain a particular skill. Shared vision would be a vision that is shared within the organization, and so on. So to achieve personal mastery, so personal mastery is actually referring to a discipline of an individual. They're trying to focus and clarify and deepen their own personal vision. They're focusing on their own energies and developing a patience and being open and honest about what they can actually do and where they want to actually proceed to. So personal learning, it doesn't ensure that the organizational learning is happening, but it can be beneficial to organizational learning towards the end. So individuals actually want to learn, and they living to actually create, a personal knowledge for themselves. They're working towards a particular goal that they want to go for. They've got a passion that they want to achieve a certain thing. So that's what they're doing when they're doing personal mastery. Understanding and developing our mental models. So according to Senge, our mental models are deeply ingrained assumptions, generalizations, or even pictures and images that influence how we understand the world and how we take action. So mental models actually represent the individual's ability to compare new ideas with any internal images of the world, of what they view it as. So these images, these mental images, they might contrast with their new ideas, and it might stop them from turning their visions into reality. So that can be an issue there. But it's important for an organization to foster openness among its people. So while they're putting them in the right direction, it's a good idea to actually work with those mental models that the person is visioning, and try and put that ability into new ideas and foster that into new practice. Then we have building a shared vision. So shared vision is actually referring to the ability of a group to form and hold a common picture of a desired future. So this shared vision is, say, you might have a shared vision with your organization. You might all have the same ideas you want to work towards, the same goal you're working towards. So you've all got that same outcome that you're working towards. So learning to learn as a team. So this is team learning. So according to Senge, team learning is the process of aligning and developing the capacities of a team to create the results its members truly desire. So when you're achieving personal mastery or you've got shared vision, these are really important to learning organizations, but there might not be enough. So it is important that people learn together so that they can actually act together. So team learning actually starts with a dialogue. So it starts with a process of thinking together. So it's members don't make any personal assumptions. They're just going into a group. They've got an awareness of what they're working towards, and they're collectively thinking. They're thinking together, how can we focus on this particular achievement? How can we get to the goals or to the achievements that we're looking to get to? And then we've got the all-encompassing system thinking. Now, system thinking is understanding that 1 + 1 is more than 2. So it's not only seeing the parts, but also understanding how these parts work together. So yeah, there might be 2 points, 2 plans of action that will 1 and 1. You will get to 2. But how many steps you need to take within those actions? How much work is it going to be? How much breakdown are you going to do with that? So you've got to think that it can constitute to more than this. So system thinking, it can be a conceptual cornerstone, which is what Senge's approach talks about. So it's about the discipline that recognizes the interconnection between the parts that make up a whole. So like I said, you might have 2 particular tasks that need to be solved or done to achieve your overall goal. But how many little parts will you have to break that down into? So system thinking, it acknowledges that organizations are complex systems, and they're composed of many interrelated components. And it's actually important that you understand the key components and how they actually interact with each other. So it's important to understand how things will work together. So managers within the organization need to learn to think at a systems level. So they need to give it quite a lot of importance because it affects the long-term impact of system dynamics. So it's not a short-term issue. It won't be the short-term problems that are encountered. It's the long-term that you're looking at. So that was 4.1. We're going to make our way on to 4.2 now. And on here, we're going to look at describing the elements of the training cycle. So whenever you actually participate in a training program, it can be virtual or traditional classroom, or it can be something that's cookie cutter style where everybody's learning the same thing, or it can be something that's completely unique and developed by scratch. So that means somebody's looked at an issue within their company and they decided, right, we're all lacking in this particular thing. There's no training available. I'm going to create it. So whether it's taught by someone in your organization or an external person, like an external vendor, or it's a teaching program about management development skills or word processing or any sort of programs that are designed, it has to follow a specific process. And we can call this an ISD model. So the training cycle actually begins long before the training program is actually started. So it also even continues after the training program has been completed, because then you're looking at feedback and seeing what can we improve. So it's a continuous cycle where you're developing this training. Now we're going to look at an illustration of the 5 stages of the training cycle. Now you'll see that these actually work off one another, so it's not necessarily how it's developed. So we would start off with assess and analyze the needs. So you'd look at your organization, you'd see, what do I need? What do my employees need? What are we lacking? You're going to develop the learning objectives. You'll design and develop the program. You'll implement the design, and then you'll evaluate performance. Once you've evaluated performance, you might go back to the beginning again and say, right, I've evaluated this. We could have done this better, or we did this great. Let me introduce that into our new program. Then you'd assess and analyze the needs again, and it would just continually work as a cycle. So when you assess and analyze needs, so this stage of the training cycle is called analysis in the ATHE acronym. So generally, you need to conduct an assessment and analyze the data. So you're identifying any needs or any issues that are specific. So first, you want to make sure that there's a reason that you're conducting the training. So what actually needs doing? Why is this taking place? So you might be able to do on-the-job coaching. You might have online content. You might be able to deliver it through, say we're going to do it within work, we're going to just look at a training module on the internet, we're going to read some articles, any type of information. So secondly, you need to determine if it's actually necessary. So when you carry out an analysis, that should tell you exactly what needs to be taught, so what content, and how it needs to be taught, so the methodology. So there's a lot of ways that you can conduct assessments. So you can use formal instruments, so that will measure a person's skill or knowledge, so like assessment tests and things. You can use written questionnaires or interviews, or even speak with employees and supervisors. So if you use interviews, you can actually meet individuals one-to-one, or you can do small focus groups, depending on what time-wise is the best approach. So another way to assess is that you can actually observe an employee working. So you're able to look at them, you're able to see how they actually work, and then you can actually use any records or reports, any performance assessments that actually already exist, and see where the gap might be. So at this stage, your goal is just to collect the data and see where the gaps are, what between the job requirement and the individual skill or knowledge. So you're checking what needs to be done, what the person's skill is, and what the job actually needs you to be doing. And that's how you're assessing. Then the second step would be, after you've made an assessment, would be to develop your objectives. So after you've actually determined that there actually does need to be training needs to take place, the next step that you're going to do is you want to know exactly what you want the training to accomplish. You need to know what your objectives are. So there are 2 kinds of objectives from the 2 perspectives of training. So you've got the learning or performance objectives. So this is where you're looking at the knowledge or skill and what you're actually seeing, what you want the training to have the desired effect that you want from the training. So you can call them learning or performance objectives. It really doesn't matter. The whole purpose of this is that you realize that you need to demonstrate what your participants have learned and what they can perform. So what changes did they make? How is this going to affect the objectives that you're looking to train? So the objective, so the training objective is a statement of what the instructor hopes to accomplish during the session. So it might be an outcome where they want a particular program to be taught or a particular skill or procedure to be taught. So this session will create a positive learning climate that encourages participants to get involved and ask questions. So that is one of the objectives. So some trainers actually include both learning and training objectives in their design. So learning objectives are a required step in every single training design. You need to know what your learning objective is before you can actually even, design what training you need to do, because you need to know what needs to be taught and what the lack is or where the areas of development need to be. So training objectives actually help the trainer to focus on designing and delivering a first-class training program, because they're able to set targets which the trainer can work towards achieving with their participants. So the participants, the learners, they're going to be told what the learning objectives are at the beginning of a session so that they're clear, so that they know this is what we're working towards. So there'll be less confusion about what are we doing here, what's going on. And this will mainly be told, and it should preferably be told at the same time as they're told about the training. So you'd get your employees and you tell them, right, this is the objective. We're going to learn how to master Excel. And this is how we're going to do it. So we're going to look at a trainer. They're going to teach us one-to-one. We're going to look at some YouTube videos, or we've got a specialist coming in to give us hands-on talk about how to do things. And then you would design and develop the program. So you've looked at the objectives, you've decided when the program can begin, you've looked at the program design. Now you need to decide exactly what you're going to accomplish with the objectives you've set. So there's a lot of things that you need to consider when you're designing a training program. So if you haven't already, you need to decide what the type of delivery will be, what the focus of this is, and how to achieve the best results. So are you going to do on-site classroom? Are you going to do virtual classroom? Is it going to be self-paced, where the learners are learning by themselves over the internet? What sort of performance support tools are you going to use? Will it be self-study, or is there going to be a combination of all of these into like a blended learning solution? So you might have some on-site learning, you might have some e-learning. So how is this going to work? So you need to ask questions that are going to help determine how is this going to happen, where are we going to do this, and what process are we going to use. So here are some questions that you can ask. How many participants need new knowledges or skills? Where are the participants located, and how much time is required to do this? So how much consistency is needed? When is the training required? How many participants will be in each class? And what level of trainer expertise will be required? So you've got to think about all of these questions before you can even start. So it is quite a time-consuming and long process to do this. So you might also decide about how you're going to design the content. So there's thousands of products that are available, so you can purchase pre-designed off-the-shelf content, or you can and then customize it. But you can also look at other methods to ensure that learning is actually being taught and applied to the job that it's focusing on. So you need to have a process where you can evaluate the program's effectiveness and see, is this suitable for us? Do we need to customize it a bit more? Do we need to change anything? How is this going to focus on what we actually need? So if you decide to customize or even design a training program, that is a very big task. You're going to need a lot of materials. You're going to need to know exactly what your objectives are. You need to be very clear so that you can actually customize it in the best way possible. So what participant materials do the learners need? Do they need any audio-visual materials? What sort of equipment will you use? If it's an online course, what sort of technical support will they require? So will your learners require job aids? Do they need paper? Are they going to physically be writing out assignments or carrying out tasks? Or are they going to do this online? And while this stage is a very exciting stage where you're actually planning something and, you know, it's nice to see that, oh, this is my baby, I'm actually doing this completely by myself. It's extremely exhausting, it's time consuming, and it can be a lot of work. So it's no joke completely creating a new program from scratch. I've had experience in this, and believe me, it's the results make you very happy when you've designed something from scratch, but the process and the time and the effort and the research that goes into it, sometimes they can be very headache-inducing. So implement the design. So once you've done all that, you've designed a training program, you know exactly how you're going to do it, what sort of format you're going to do it. Now you need to implement it. So this is the stage of the training cycle where you actually conduct the program. So a trainer actually completes a huge amount of preparation before the program starts, and then they're going to actually start preparing to teach it now. So there's no guarantee here that the program will go off without a hitch. What will happen is, as you start teaching something, you realize, right, I should have included this in it, or we needed this resource, or what we're doing right here, that's we need to adjust it now and make it a little bit better. So even if you're doing a fantastic job, things won't go off without a hitch, like I was saying. So that's why some trainers do a pilot program, so with a group of pseudo learners. So this is where they're doing just testing it out, to be honest. Now these pseudo learners will actually give feedback before the session is ready for the actual learners. And when you've looked at that feedback, you're able to actually see what can I change, what can I do, what can I adjust. So you can use both the presentation and facilitation skills in this. So you can use it in a traditional way or in a virtual classroom. But this feedback, when you're doing it with pseudo learners, will actually help you to realize, right, let me try and make this program as smooth as possible. What issues do they come up with, and how can I fix those? So presenters can provide more information. So if the information is new or technical, you may need to present a lot more information. So the preferred role, this is the preferred role as a facilitator. So you might have decided, I'm going to give them brand new information here, but it might not be enough. So you might need to put more technical jargon into it. You might need to explain it a lot more clearly to the ability and to the understanding of your learners. So facilitators play more of a catalyst role and ensure learners' participation. So a good trainer is often synonymous with the term facilitator. So facilitator is something to make something happen. You're facilitating a new skill. The trainer in this aspect is the facilitator because they're making sure that this is actually taking place. And then you're going to need excellent delivery skills. Even if you're doing it in a virtual classroom or a traditional classroom, what type of training you're doing, you need to be able to convey yourself, and you need to have that knowledge that you can put confidence into your learners. Now, if you're stuttering or if you're confused or if you're not sure what's going on, then your learners are not going to develop any trust in you. They're not going to be motivated. They're not going to want to see what you're doing. So you need to have fantastic delivery skills, and you need to know exactly what you're talking about. So while you're conducting the training, you want to constantly read your learners and see whether you're meeting their needs. So obviously when you're reading them, you're looking at their body language, You're seeing are they messing about on their phones, are they fidgeting, or are they fully focusing on you? Or are you talking so much that they're getting so bored that maybe you need to have a hands-on approach and let them actively participate as well? So if you see that a particular approach isn't working, stop it and try another one. Like I said, if you think that somebody's getting bored or they're all just scribbling on their pieces of paper or they're just sitting there looking really glazed and not understanding, maybe introduce an activity where you're waking them up and you're actually asking them questions so they're forced to actively participate. So that was 4.2. Now we're going to go into 4.3. Oh, we actually have one more. We're going to evaluate performance before we go into 4.3. So when it's over, it's not actually over. So you've got to think about, so this is where something I call reflecting. This is where reflection comes in. So you're evaluating how things went. You're looking back. You're going to see how you did, what could have been improved, what could have been changed, what was fantastic. And you're going to evaluate how your course or your program actually went. So first, the evaluation will tell you whether or not the objectives were accomplished. Second, the information that you get from the evaluation stage should be put into the assess and analyze stage. So you're feeding it back. If you remember that image that we saw, where it was like a cycle, things just feed back in. So you're going to improve. You're going to use this evaluation to improve and work towards the assess and analyze stage. So this will be used to improve the training program when it's going to be conducted again. And like we said, like I just mentioned, this is why the model is circular, because everything feeds off the other. And then finally, you've got your evaluation information. So this will actually be like a basis for you to determine what needs need to be met for future programs. What changes do you need to make? Do you need to make it more actively participated where the actual learners are being a lot more hands-on? Or was it too much of that? Or was that too messy? Was it distracting too many times? Do you need to get them to sit down and just do a lot more listening? So you need to evaluate what will work best. And now on to 4.3. So for 4.3, it's explain the characteristics of effective training programs. So following, we're going to look at the effective training courses. So number one is start with the training needs assessment. So this is a process and it determines who needs to be trained. So you're going to look at what sort of training they need, what needs to be improved, how is this going to be processed, how will we support it, what are the strategic objectives, and how is this going to be aligned with that. Number two is identify and communicate purpose, objectives, and outcomes. So these need to be identified based on the results of the training needs assessment, and you need to communicate these to your trainees. So in a very clear, concise, and easy way to understand, so that they actually understand what they need to do and what the objectives are. So when you communicate with them, you need to include a message on how the training will be applied and what you expect the outcomes to be. And this will actually help the motivation to increase. So if they know exactly what they're doing, they're not coming in very confused and saying, why are we here? What are we doing? They need to know exactly what's going on so they can be motivated to actually do it. Then we've got to include relevant content. So you'd actually need to have the content of that training. It needs to be relevant to what actually needs to be taught. It needs to be linked to the job experiences. It needs to be linked to the strategic objectives that you're working towards, so that you're not teaching about something completely off topic. It needs to all be concise. You need to have active demonstrations. So trainers need to actively demonstrate specific skills and processes in the training. So this will actually model good behavior. They'll actually understand physically. They'll see you talking about it, they'll hear you talking about it, but then they'll actually physically see you doing something. So when you're demonstrating actively, it's a really good training tool. So for example, if the trainer is on interpersonal communications, the trainer might demonstrate active listening skills through role playing with a willing participant. So for an engine repair class, the trainer might bring an engine and demonstrate how to bore out the cylinders. So those are some good examples of actively demonstrating what you need to do. And then number 5 is opportunities for practice. Now, effective training programs include multiple training opportunities for trainees to practice the skills that they've learned. Now, you might remember in a previous session where I said that when you physically just stand there and you're explaining something to a group of learners, only 5% of them might actually embed or learn or remember what you were talking about. They might say, right, yeah, I know what's going on. But if you actually stand there and you let them actively participate, you've talked about something, you show them how to do it. Now, if you go and let them do it, 90% of those learners will actually retain that knowledge. They'll actually keep it and they'll say, right, yeah, I can do this now. I learned about it. I know the process of it. I saw my trainer, she showed me how to do it. And now, then I got to try how to do it myself. So it's at that stage, they might make mistakes. You know, they might do something wrong, but they don't need to worry about any consequences that are happening at that time. Because if they make a mistake, the trainer there to help them and show, right, this is what went wrong. This is how you can fix it. And that will lead them into being more adept at their work when they actually go into the physical environment. They're not going to make as many mistakes because it's a safe environment where they get to try new skills and they're not worried about any consequences that might happen. So they're comfortable actually having this opportunity to practice. And then we've got number 6, regular feedback during training. Now this is quite important because it helps the learner understand exactly, or the employee understand exactly what they're doing, what they might need to fix, or how well they're actually doing. So feedback should be given during practice and also after the exercises have been completed. So if you're there and you see somebody's trying to fix an engine, or they're tinkering about with it, you might realize that they might be using the wrong screwdriver or the wrong tool. And you could go and say, right, this is fine, what you're trying to do. Ask them what they're trying to do. And then say, how about you try using this one instead? Or this tool might be better suited. So you're giving them feedback while they're working. And then afterwards, when the exercise has been completed, you can speak to them again and give them more feedback. And it does help you, and the employee will get to understand what they did right and how they can improve that if they didn't do something too great. So it should be directly related to how the trainee performed the task. So this feedback should be always focused on the task and not on their personal characteristics. So don't give bad feedback by saying, oh, you're being such a klutz, oh, that's silly, why are you behaving like that? You know, it's better to give feedback like, I noticed you dropped the lever a few times because your grip is incorrect. So rather than saying, oh, you can't even hold this properly, you're such a klutz, you would say, but I think your grip is not right. Maybe we can work on having a better grip, and then you can show them how to hold that particular tool. And then number 7, the last point here, is post-training environment. So after training, it's important that employees are given opportunities to perform the skills they've learned. So if this doesn't happen, it's not going to support the research that the training has showed. So its research shows that this will have no impact on their performance or their organizational utility. So you might have gone into training, you might have learned a new skill, but if you're never going to get that opportunity to do that new skill within the work environment, the training will have had no aspect to your work whatsoever. It would have been useless. So you need to give them the opportunity to actually do this, practice these skills after the training has taken place. It'll embed the knowledge a little bit more. They'll get a lot more confident for when they're actually working the actual job themselves. So now we're going on to our first merit question for M1. Explain the purpose of a training needs analysis and how to carry one out. So what is the purpose of this? So this is to understand the current performance of an organization and the individuals in it, and the desired performance of an organization and the individuals in it. So you're going to understand what the current performance is within your organizations for the individuals that are working with it. And then you need to actually understand what is the desired outcome. What is it that you actually want as an organization? And what do you want the organization to be doing and the individuals to be doing within it to achieve that? So there might be a difference between the current performance and what you actually want. So that is the first purpose. Figure out, are these performance needs, are they meeting our desired performance? If not, then you're going to need to do training. So training analysis also assesses who needs training, what training or learning they need, how to design effective learning or training, so the impact of the training that we're planning, and the cost and resources, the budgets, and assess how much value for money is. So when you're carrying out a training analysis, first you've looked at what the performance is, then you're going to see what your desired performance actually is for the organization. And then you're actually going to be able to understand who needs this training, why do they need training, what type of training do they need. To answer all of these questions. And then how do you actually carry one out? So each process will actually differ with each organization, but a basic way to carry one out would be to set strategic objectives according to your organization, assess what operational outcomes your organization needs, and how can you generate the outcomes that your organization wants. You'd have to see what the employee capabilities are, and then, what can your employees actually do and what do they need to do? You're going to assess the learning capabilities and carry out a gap assessment. So when you've done this gap assessment, based on this, you're going to be able to prioritize the learning and training needs, and then you'll be able to see how is this going to be delivered? How will we evaluate it? Much will it cost? So these are some steps for how one can get carried out. Now we're going to go on to 4M2, the second merit question. So for 3 different training methods, describe the advantages and disadvantages of their use. Now, I've got 3 different ones here. It's up to you what you choose on here, but you need to choose 3 different training methods. So I've explained, so for example, on-the-job training. So I've got some advantages here. So it's on-the-site training, it's under supervision, and learning in an actual or physical work environment, so the environment you actually work in. The disadvantages can be disorganized. You might not have experienced trainers. People might not be motivated, or they might not really be being taught correctly. So if you've got somebody who might be experienced in doing a certain skill, that's not necessarily the way that you want them to be taught, because they might have developed bad habits. It's the same for example, an example I can think of is driving. If you're learning to drive by a driving instructor, they're going to know the exact way to teach you the proper processes and how you should be taught so you can pass your driving test. Now, if you end up getting taught by a friend or a family member, they might be an excellent driver for themselves, but they might have picked up some bad habits. They might not put their hands on the steering wheel the correct way on the 10 and the 2 positions. They might not, put their handbrake on when they're parked. Little things. They might not be checking their mirrors constantly. So any little bad habits that they've picked up on, that they do unconsciously, you're going to be taught in the same way. So being taught correctly by an experienced trainer or not being taught correctly, that is quite important. Then we've got off-the-job training. So you've got things like lectures, conferences, training that you might go to. So the advantages are you're being led by experienced instructors. You can meet with like-minded peers from other organizations, and these topics are normally broken down and they're easy to understand. Now, if someone's been delivering a training program for a number of years or a number of months, they're going to have, worked out any kinks that are within it. So it's going to be a smoother process. Now, the disadvantages of this might be that if you're sending them off to off-the-job training, you might have to pay for this training. Most likely you will. You're going to lose out on that person working for that day. You're still paying them to go there as well, so it's double cost, and then you're not getting as much productivity at work. And apprenticeships. So the advantages for apprenticeships are you're acquiring valuable skills in a work setting. It's cheap labor for employees, and it also reduces the cost of production because an apprentice will be getting paid less than a skilled worker because they're working for you, but they're actually learning while they're working. You're teaching them. But the disadvantages of this can be the length of training. So how long is it you have to train them? It can be expensive to train a person who has no experience because they might make mistakes, they might do something wrong, it might affect production. You might have some items that are not sellable after this or not workable after this. It's time consuming. And also, if a person fails the training, this may affect labor and production. So you might have spent, say, 18 months training a particular person to do it within some skills to work within your organization. But at the end of the 18 months, if they don't pass the training, then that would have been wasted time. You're going to lose out on the time, the money that's been spent on it, and it's going to affect your labor, your production workforce. Now, before D1, this is a distinction question. What we want here is to produce the learning objectives for a work-related training course. So first you need to look at what are the organization's learning objectives. So I've got an example here. So to train individuals in a new system or procedure. So if you want somebody to they've got a good skill or knowledge of Excel, but you want them to have a mastery in Excel. So that is what you want to train them in. So you need to set realistic goals. Now these goals should be short and simple. They shouldn't be very long worded. They need to be easy to understand. And you need to be specific and realistic. Are these goals that you've set, are they relevant? Are they achievable? Can we do them? What time scale will this take? What sort of finances will this take? So produce some learning objectives and then tell me how they're going to get done. So that was learning outcome 4. Now I want to bring your attention to the Moodle learning environment. Just re-log back in. So here is the learning outcome 4, the PowerPoint that we've been looking at. And then on here, we've got Johari's window of developing self-awareness. So that's a nice document that you can have a look at, just to gain a little bit more. Bye-bye.